Hey Kyle, thanks for joining. We're currently waiting for other folks to slot on in and stuff, but thank you so much for applying to manage your book club. And yeah, super excited to have you. I very much bet that we're kind of at the lunch rush right now. So folks are probably wrapping up last minute meetings or maybe finishing a sandwich. So hopefully we see some more faces soon.
Glad to be here.
How's your day going so far?
Oh, it's funny. Technology is always a special experience. So, how about you?
So far, so good. We've had two of these book club sessions prior to this, and they've been fantastic and a blast. So we're trying to accommodate for as many managers and also time zones as possible. So there's a total of like five. So this is our third one. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's been really, really fun so far. And some amazing conversations have come out of it, which have made it super worth it. So yeah, good stuff. And did you finish all the kind of, were you able to finish part one? I know you probably have a pretty busy schedule.
Yeah. Actually, the video links that was in the Notion doc was super helpful today. I just listened to it at 2x today. I
Yeah.
was just waiting. I was in the morning getting some work done, put on 2x and just listened to it all real fast.
Exactly. It's super clutch. So I'm really glad that you're able to use that resource that came straight from Kim's team. Hello, Laura.
Hello, hi. Good. How is everyone?
Doing good. Just waiting for some other folks to join the group. I see Andrew in here. We had a lot of RSVPs, so I'm guessing hello. I'm guessing a lot of folks are still finishing up lunch, shoving a sandwich in their mouth, or getting off a meeting of some sort. So we're gonna give some time for folks to join. But thank you for coming to book club, everybody, and thank you for showing up. I'd love to start with a really quick icebreaker. So if you could either throw into the chat or start with a reaction, green, yellow, red. If green is great, yellow okay, and red terrible, how are you feeling today? And I might ask you why, so just keep that in mind, but I promise this is a safe space. Okay, Andrew, Kyle, you're both feeling green. You want to share why you're feeling green today?
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? Okay. Uh, just being part of this book club is kind of cool. Just seeing other people, like all the different companies and everything. I think that's green for me. Is I've never been part of a book club before, especially Candor, which I really, I really vibe with what she's asking for in terms of that. And to me, that's what's green. Just being part of that is just, especially my feelings and how everybody thinks about that. And then maybe hopefully I can share how like, it's helped me out in my career as a manager from that point. So that's why I'm green.
Fantastic. Super glad to hear, and we're just as excited as you are. Kyle, why do you check in green today?
Very similar reasons. I've modeled most of my management style around radical candor. I read it some years ago, and I'm excited to hear how other people have implemented radical candor into their operations. I hopefully get to hear stories and how it relates to lives, and I'm genuinely excited.
Fantastic. Amazing. And Paloma, just to get you up to speed, we're doing a quick little icebreaker. So just green, yellow, red. If green is great, yellow okay, red terrible. How are you feeling today? Oh, also, you don't have to share if you don't necessarily want to. I can pass to Laura. Laura, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I am scrambling a little today. I had ended up with more on my plate than I expected to this morning. So just trying to get a bunch of investor and pitch decks done, as well as lead my team as we've been kicking off Q2. So a little bit here, there, and everywhere today, but making it work.
All right, fantastic. So it's a little bit of a lighter group. I'm guessing maybe the lunch rush is still getting some folks a little bit busy. So we'll get started just for sake of time, but hopefully more folks end up joining. Thank you so much for being here for our first kind of manager book club. We've had two sessions earlier today that were fantastic and full of wonderful discussions. So I definitely feel like we'll have that here too and have a lot of fun in the process. Today, as you well know, we're going over Radical Candor, part one. That's about 110 pages into this book, and it goes over a lot of the kind of fundamentals when it comes to management. So before I kind of dive too deep, I would love to introduce myself and my wonderful co-host, Monica. So first, starting with me, my name is Yen. I'm co-founder of Kona. We're the manager, co-pilot, and employee well-being platform for remote teams. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a huge, huge fan of using leadership books and kind of wisdom in order to guide leadership best practices and strategies, and especially when it comes to like empathetic leadership. So super excited for today's convo. And passing to my wonderful co-host, Monica.
Hello, everybody. My name is Monica. I am first marketer at Kona, and me and Yen just happen to have the exact same degree in English. So we are professional bookologists. I love books. I read 100 books every year. Books and management are my biggest passions. So I am excited that I can combine both of them via this book club. I will be your admin. So if you see me looking down, I'm making sure everybody is in the correct room and all the comments are showing.
Yeah, and when Monica says that she reads 100 books, her good read literally says 100 books, and it's very intimidating, but super inspiring to keep up with as well. So Monica's fantastic. And again, we're the team at Kona. So just before we dive in, I know it's a bit of a smaller group, but still important to kind of call out discussion rules. This topic, particularly with feedback, requires a lot of psychological safety and trust. And that can be a large thing to ask to a group of strangers who are all meeting each other for the very first time. So in order to create that safe container, I wanted to start with some discussion rules. First being always assume positive intent wherever possible, given that we're in a completely remote setting. Some communication things can come off a little off or maybe weird on Zoom. So please assume positive intent. Most of the folks here do probably have not malicious intent when they're sharing things. Number two, create a safe space for others. That can mean creating and passing the mic as much as possible if you notice you're taking up a little bit more airtime, and also allowing the other folks to speak and really engaging and validating folks in the chat and also over audio. And the third, acknowledge, validate, and create a safe space for diverse perspectives. We have leaders from all sorts of walks of life and different companies. You can see the extent of which they're within this little club member directory that I just shared inside the chat. These are all the folks that were slated to kind of come, and we'll hopefully see some of their faces as we go. But if you do recognize a few names, you can kind of get a little bit more up to speed with their role and what the kind of background they have. And we all take a lot of value from having these diverse perspectives in our conversation today. So if we're good to go, I can move forward into our little agenda. So today's agenda is going to be pretty straightforward and simple. You just saw the introduction. We'll dive into a part one review. We're essentially going through each of the different chapters and also sparking a mini discussion per the topics that come up in that chapter. Then we'll go through an actual feedback workshop. It's a much smaller group, so you'll be able to have intimate one-on-one kind of conversations where you practice both praise and criticism. And then finally, we'll have an open manager roundtable, a safe space for folks to share what's going on in their org, a particular struggle, and perhaps get advice from the other folks in this room with any sort of thing that you're dealing with or seeing on the ground. So how's that sound so far? Are we doing good? And please comment if I talk too fast. I tend to be a rambler, so call me out and we can definitely make this happen. So part one, that goes over again the first 110 pages of Kim Scott's book and a lot of the video book as well. Kim Scott, in one of the first entry lines of this kind of section, says, part one is designed to set your mind at ease. Being a good boss is hard for everyone, no matter how successful they appear on the outside. So I think this is a really humbling phrase, especially given that Kim Scott has seen all sorts of types of leadership. The fact that it's hard, regardless of where you stand, how long you've been doing it, and what kind of manager you are, is really reassuring for a lot of us. Something I think we all should hear more often. So diving into the intro, this is the section where we learn about Bob. The impact of my behavior with Bob didn't start with him. Others on the team wondered why I accepted such poor work. And if you're kind of a little bit fuzzy on what that anecdote was about, essentially, Kim was managing this really popular person named Bob. And Bob was really popular. He was very charismatic, but the only problem was he had really poor work performance. And so oftentimes Bob was really not able to perform at the level, and Kim didn't want to give him any feedback because she was worried of hurting his feelings. When it came time to let Bob go, he asked the crucial question, why didn't anyone tell me? Which is probably the worst thing that you can hear as a manager, especially in kind of an end of, in a termination conversation, essentially. So as we go through that, I think it's a story that resonates with a lot of managers put in that similar position. And so I want to ask the group, have you ever experienced a Bob? Have you ever had to manage a Bob and had to kind of give feedback or perhaps withheld feedback? And why do you think you withheld telling Bob as it was what was going on? So first discussion question. Yeah, and also, by the way, forgot to say, but please use the raise hand thing. I think we're a smaller group, so it should be less of a problem, but it kind of cuts through all the Zoom chaos.
I mean, I can start, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Madhur. So yes, I do have a Bob in my team, and I mean, it's a little tricky because for me, I'm also a new manager. I have been a manager, like, from year and a half or 2 years, so now in the management side. And this person has been in the company for almost like 20 years, and believes in a different mindset, basically. So when I start giving the feedback, hey, like, we have to do this, or we have to do this, and, like, as a staff engineer, you have to, we have to come up with all of these different things. There's always a reason, or there is always a complaint which goes with that, is like, hey, it's just, HR, fluff, or staff engineer should do this or do that, but you know what, in this world, nobody cares. I mean, it goes into a different direction where it's kind of goes on, and the one-on-one goes like an hour sometimes. And so that's the one of the tricky thing. And then sometimes it's not like I don't give feedback. Sometimes I don't give feedback just because I want to save my time. And I'm like, hey, you know what, like, I'm giving you this much of work, yeah, please get it done, kind of thing. So those are the two different kind of scenarios where it goes. I can be better at it. I'm kind of getting into a stage where I'm very straightforward and very much like straight up, like, hey, this is not happening, we have to do this, or this needs to change. But I know, like, it's not always the recommended way. There has to be some softness, there has to be something. So that's where my challenge is. So
Definitely. I also really appreciate it. It takes a lot of bravery to share first in a group full of strangers. So really appreciate you for sharing that story. Kyle, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to add to that a little bit?
I stay unmuted. I like to live on the edge. Okay, so I had a Bob at a previous employer, and this particular Bob was also very temperamental. So giving feedback to them was kind of walking on eggshells. They had a big personality. So when things were wrong, they were very outspoken. So if they disagreed with what I was saying, every other person on the team would know that they disagreed about what I was saying. So I had to be very careful with this one. There was a particular scenario, this was when I was newer into management, where we were in a meeting and he was invited, and it was with a lot of my peers, and we were all director level. And he spoke extremely disrespectful to one of my peers. And when I had just kind of told him, well, thank you for your feedback, if you could just, we'll talk about this a bit later, and kind of kicked him out of the room. I went into his cube afterwards, and I just very clearly said, you know, you can't do that, right? You know, you can't say things like that, and you can't speak to anyone regardless of their level like that. It's just inappropriate. And we had a very good discussion about how to talk to people in the workplace. And I made it very clear that there was going to be a change, and it was his choice of whether he makes the change or he doesn't. But what would happen afterwards would be the same. People would be respected. And it took months of me dealing with this before it kind of came to that point. And it took it happening in front of my peers for me to take that action. And I wish I would have taken the action before them, because it would have saved me some embarrassment for sure.
Definitely. I think I see a lot of head nods over here too. The idea that I wish I would have said something earlier, I think that is what is encapsulated in this Bob story, and something a lot of managers can relate to all too well. Really great anecdotes. Thank you so much for sharing. And we're going to speed through to chapter 1, the next section. So in chapter 1, Kim Scott says, we undervalue the emotional labor of being the boss. This emotional labor is not just part of the job, it's the key to being a good boss. And in this, she outlines 3 things that managers are responsible for: results, guidance, and team building. And in essence, kind of drives us to this kind of axis of care personally and challenge directly, the 2 classic things that make up her 4-quadrant radical candor framework. So the next question I want to ask are, what are some of the ways that you care personally or show that you care personally with direct reports or at work? And what are some tips maybe that you have for the other folks in this group? And I will challenge folks that haven't spoken yet to speak, but if people are too nervous, we can always go back to folks that like being unmuted. Yeah, Andrew, please.
Hi. So for me, I think the biggest thing for a caring person for me is listening to them, right? When I have one-on-ones with my direct reports, it's I just want them to talk and me just listen. I don't like to interject a lot of stuff. I just like hear them out and kind of like give the head nod here and there, and interject when needed for me. And then if there's some things that they're having problems with or some gaps they need, then I can go and show that personally. A good example is this, right? So I have 2 new managers coming in. I bought them What's Laraway's book, right, with her thing, and I'm gonna give it to them as a gift from them as a manager, saying these are something that I helped as a manager to help me out. You can choose to read it if you want to, but this helped me as I am today. My gift to you, right? To me, that's me caring personally, right? Is to kind of help them understanding where I see they can help out and give them something that would help benefit them. Where I know before it's past, in my experience as other managers, they can give 2 craps about me, for the most part, right? It's like these are the goals you're doing from there. So keep it short. That's kind of how I've seen care person is more just active listening to all my reports and then giving feedback when I need to and make sure I hear them, because I think to me, that's the biggest part that a lot of reports want to hear is you just like, hearing them out first before you kind of speak your mind. If that makes sense.
Definitely. That listening aspect and the display of you being invested in their career essentially is crucial. So I love that. Madhur, yeah.
I mean, if anyone else wants to go before me. But yeah, so for me, like as Andrew mentioned, in one-on-ones or listening and stuff like that. But when I like to do sometimes, just kind of trash talks to kind of understand each other and understanding what they are kind of going through. And I have 1 or 2 team members who have like, oh, I have to pick kids at 4 o'clock, or I have to pick kids at 4:30, and like oh, my kid is sick, or my mom and my in-laws are here, or something like that. So just like talking, and then like, hey, what? Sometimes I'm like, oh, this meeting is at 4 o'clock. Hey, you have to pick your kids up. So should I move the meeting to 4:30 or maybe like 3:30, or like something like showing that we do care you as a whole human being, not just as a a person who is just working here, and just making sure that and also it gives them that sense of like, hey, he remembers that I am going through this, or something like that, which makes them feel like, hey, he's thinking about me, or he really does care about me, kind of thing. And of course, like I like to kind of do the career planning and career paths and everything. I'm like, hey, you know what, like I want you to think about your career, and whether you are like, I work at PlayStation, and it doesn't mean like you have to think about your career at PlayStation. I'm asking you to think about in general what you want to do in life, and tell me what you want to do, and then I can help you with that, and in whatever possible way in PlayStation, give you some opportunities of, like, let's say, project management or this thing or that thing, like where you can develop your skills so that you can achieve that, whether you're on PlayStation or outside. I value you as a human being, not attached to just the employer or the work. So those are the couple of small things which I tend to do. I think it seems to work, but but yeah, there could be lot of other ways which I'm eager to hear from other people.
Definitely. And by the way, just to call out, we have a manager roundtable at the very end, so I have to keep speeding through just for sake of time to make sure we get there. But these have been some fantastic points, and there's going to be a lot more tips shared. So amazing. On to chapter 2. I can see I'm going to have to be really, really direct to get through to you. You are one of the smartest people I know, but saying so much makes you sound stupid. This was a quote where Kim's boss said this to her after a major presentation. And after reading it, I know I grimace a bit because it seems pretty harsh, but it was exactly what Kim needed to hear and the kinds of feedback that resonated with her best. And so this is an example of what Kim describes as radically candid feedback. There are 3 other segments described in the book: ruinous empathy, trying to be too kind or nice, and maybe avoiding feedback as a result; manipulative insincerity, prioritizing your own ego. What am I going to look like if I say this? Do I even care about this person enough to say this? And third, obnoxious aggression, the classic Steve Jobs, your work is shit, or you're doing shit work, which is honestly sometimes harsh in some people's style. And so the next question I want to ask the group, what quadrant do you feel you tend to hang out in? Do you have kind of a default mode? Because I think it's very rare that folks like always consistently hit radical candor without any sort of practice or training. We often fall into one of these three categories. So hearing from a few folks, where do you often kind of find yourself in, and why do you think you fall into that category?
Yeah, I can share. This is Shweta. So I feel at this point, I am definitely in the radical candor category, and part of the reason is when I read the book and understood that sometimes I was doing ruinous empathy. Like I'm normally a leader who's very known to be direct and caring personally, but there were sometimes with uncomfortable conversations that at the beginning of my leadership journey, I would err on the side of being too empathetic or like breaking the bad news later and doing the feedback sandwich or whatever. But once I read the book, it was really something I was consciously paying attention to, and I would always, it takes time to build trust. Like you can't just walk into a new team and demand radical candor, right? You have to lead by example. So I just joined a new role this week. So my approach is like take the time to build the trust, right? And then that gives you the permission to hold people accountable and practice it. So that's my take.
Fantastic. We're going to hear from Laura, and then Kyle, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to probably hop to the next one, but thank you so much for volunteering. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, so I read the book a number of years ago myself too, and so I think for me, I really can only successfully practice radical candor with people I know, and who I know trust me, right? I don't think you can actually successfully do it without getting to know someone, and so for the most part, I end up in ruinous empathy with people I feel less comfortable with, and that I don't feel know me well enough to take the feedback. As it's meant to be. I think it's really, really, really critical to get to know someone personally in order to actually practice radical candor. So my default mode is definitely ruinous empathy as a result. But then anytime I'm feeling that way, I usually try to challenge myself like, well, can I get to know them so that we can move to the right? Is kind of the goal then.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And also just the way that our audience really shifts. So maybe we're able to be more aggressive with other folks, and maybe other folks we feel a little bit less safe and we feel a lot more ruinously empathetic. And then folks that we trust a lot, we can be actually candid with. I think it's a fantastic point right up there. Chapter 3, for too many bosses, recognition means promotion. But in most cases, this is a big mistake. The key is to recognize their contribution in other ways. And so this is where we talk about superstars and rock stars, superstars excelling very rapidly through the career ladder, and rock stars with a little bit more of a gradual growth path, but still bringing significant value to the organization. And so one question that I think I might have to skip in order to make time for the other ones, but just to kind of noodle on and think quietly on is just, have you ever underestimated an employee's contributions because they weren't gunning for promotion? And specifically for the kind of leaders of all different types of levels and stuff, but I think it's more specifically super important for VPs and director level folks to think about how do we actually kind of up level folks, and where do we see kind of our managers that maybe don't necessarily want to go and run large contributions and stuff? How do we discount their efforts, and how do we actually reward and encourage and continue to challenge these folks? So chapter 4, moving on to this one very rapidly. I didn't say Steve is always right. I said he always gets it right. Like anyone, he is wrong sometimes, but he insists, and not gently either, that people tell him when he's wrong. And this Steve, of course, is Steve Jobs, and describes a lot of his kind of debate, rock tumbler type of process. So this is where we see the get stuff done wheel, and we talk a lot about the different stages. And so I did want to spend a little bit of time on this section right here. Looking at this wheel, did you find yourself having a lot more ease with certain stages and a lot more difficulty with other ones? And why do you think that might be? Yeah, please, Paloma.
Yeah, in my experience, so I also became a manager in my current organization in the last year. And when being an IC here for so long, I usually tend to like drive the work that I'm doing as an IC. But now that I became a manager, I try to make it more collaborative. So the debate part of it is the one that sometimes I get hung on, because people sometimes when they're very junior, they expect me to tell them how things are supposed to be. Sometimes when they're older or more experienced, they kind of want to debate you or they don't agree with you, and that's where it can get a bit controversial sometimes, or we just need to go into the details of things. But I do like the fact that it needs to be, instead of debating, more collaborative and more open. And so I try to instill some sort of transparency or feedback loop that it's not only one way but the other way as much as I can. And that's the part that somebody mentioned, trust building. Since my team just grew in the last year, it's where I've struggled to, like, how do I break that glass so that people trust me and that we can have this open collaborative discussions. And it's not just me saying this is how it needs to be, because I may be wrong as well. So that's the part that, to me, it requires some work, and trust is based there as well.
Fantastic point. Amazing point brought up there. So I just wanted to kind of go through all these different sections and really spend a little bit of time on it, because this book is so much more than just like a feedback guide. I think we could go over like the radical candor quadrants in the very first chapter, essentially. The rest of it talks a lot about performance and the kind of intricate kind of things that are involved when it comes to really managing and having empathy and accountability. So just wanted to acknowledge all the things and all the meaty parts of the book. It's definitely worth a much longer discussion. But now we're going to dive into the radical candor workshop part. You're going to be in a one-on-one group. You'll stay in that little one-on-one pair so you can get to know that other manager and leader. But we're essentially going to go through two scenarios, one where you deliver praise and one where you deliver criticism. And the very first one, keeping in mind this whole entire quadrant, is going to go over a junior teammate that took the initiative to fix a broken process or took the initiative to kind of suggest a fix to that process. Person A is going to be the manager. Let's just say sales team if you want to, but you're an engineering manager, just go with an engineering team. And person B is a receiver. They came up with a great process for compiling learnings, took a lot of initiative there. And so go through, Monica's going to send you out into a breakout room with one person and take turns, swap off, but deliver praise. Remember to give examples, be specific, and really channel what that person might really resonate with, and test out different things as you do it. So yeah, and then we might have one group of three, given the odd number of folks. So we'll just kind of like take turns, kind of like passing around who is A, B, and then the other person is just a coworker that happens to be there, maybe, and we'll do that. Okay, cool. Hello. Yay. How was that? Show of hands and stuff. Was it good? Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, I think folks are coming back. Also, as a quick aside, Shweta, we can actually update your profile just to make it accurate and stuff. So I'll send you an email later, but just want to make sure that your profile for book club is up to date. How was that, folks? Show of thumbs, thumbs up, down, mid. Okay, so praise, we're feeling good about praise. Fantastic. This next scenario is where it gets a little bit more tricky. Criticism, the one we probably need the most practice in. So in this situation, a manager notices that their teammate is always late to meetings. This manager, person A is the manager again, runs a weekly virtual all hands at 8 a.m. and person B always oversleeps. So we're just going to have that simple scenario, have that kind of radical feedback kind of conversation, and you're going to be in the exact same groups that you just were. So familiarize yourself and say hello again. Hello, how was that? Good, fantastic.
It was good. Yeah. I think this was giving the, not a positive feedback is always interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something we need to role play and practice for sure. Show of hands and thumbs. How's that? Thumbs up, awkward, poor. Yeah, okay. It's completely okay if it requires multiple practice sessions. And like, if y'all want to meet up outside of this and be like, okay, let's role play this one thing, you totally can. This is all about making friendships and connections. So that's awesome. The very next section is all for you. This is an open manager roundtable where folks can basically share what's been going on, a situation that they've been facing. It could have to do with radical candor or be completely unrelated. This is a safe space, so I do want to kind of re-show the kind of discussion rules, again, assuming a positive intent, making space for folks, etc. And also, where possible, please anonymize folks just to preserve identity and all the kinds of things involved. But yeah, I'm just going to go on mute. And if anybody wants to share, raise your hand and I can pick you first, or just unmute and go ahead. Yeah, Kyle, please.
So I had an interesting one. I actually had to be radically candored up. So I needed to work with someone who's actually not my direct superior, but his direct superior. So I needed to communicate as we were working towards some pretty major changes in our platform. I'm coming from a place of just entering into the security team and leading that initiative. And so I'm thinking all security compliance, that's all that's inside of my head. And he's coming at it from the platform and the features and what the customers want. He's thinking about it from that perspective. And so we're in this meeting and we're skipping the circle of productivity that Kim created, but we're just directly into planning and executing. And we're talking about what we're going to put into production. And he and I are going back and forth a lot. It actually tended, I think, of the hour-long meeting, it was me and him arguing about architecture. And after the call, I set something on his calendar and said, hey, we should probably talk about this meeting. That was a bit weird. We got into a huddle today, actually, and we talked about it. And I said, I'm coming from a place that I need to work on the security side of the platform. I'm seeing a lot of problems that are systemic from there. And then he said, well, I'm coming from a place that I have all these customers talking to me about features that they want and the way they want it to work. And as soon as we aligned with what our perspectives were and where we were coming from, we immediately found a way that we could work together better and ensure that both perspectives were involved. And then one of the bigger things we walked away with was there were 8 engineers in that room, and the 2 people that are leadership were the ones who were talking the entire time. Maybe we should give the engineers the capability to talk a bit more than we did. So we had 3 pretty big wins coming out of that meeting, and I think radical candor really gave me, rereading it, kind of gave me this perspective of I need to be really direct with him right now and say what's on my mind. Otherwise, this is just going to keep happening.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's such a great story. I'm so glad that it was relevant and mindful and that you could apply what you learned like right then and there. Yeah, that's awesome. Does anybody else want to share a story, a question, asking for advice? It's all open table for you. Go for it, Andrew.
So I actually have a question for the whole group, right? So I work for a small company. We're like 50 people deep, right? We're not as big as some of the companies that you guys have worked for. I would love to have you guys ideas of how you guys can get leadership on board with like feedback systems itself. I'm the only one that does like one-on-one feedbacks. My actually leadership thinks like it's always time for the most part, and I'm like, that's not true, right? And I always come back with like a retort every single time, talk about it. I would love to hear if some of you, the people here about like how you guys have you seen that friction before or that pushback from your leadership, and what did you guys do to kind of I guess ease them into it or help them just pilot it out besides yourself in terms of like the radical candor feedback or just the one-on-one feedback itself?
It's a really great question and something I'm sure a lot of folks can resonate with. Anybody want to answer? Yeah, Laura, go for it.
So I think for me, where I find success is I got to figure out what is the thing that those leaders care about, right? Which is sometimes a mystery. I know for us, one of the ways I've gotten a little bit more of myself like in the door is they care a lot about attrition right now and controlling that. And so being able to point at the fact that because I spend this one-on-one time, because I have clear growth plans for my team, because we use Kona, right? I have had no voluntary attrition in over a year on my team, right? My team is performing and delivering what is asked of us quarter over quarter, and I show that through, for my team, we're a design team. And so we have kind of quarterly portfolio roundups of the work that we delivered. They care, basically it's figure out how to communicate and translate it into the things that they actually care about. So it's either results towards the bottom line and how you all are contributing to that, and then figure out a way to kind of tie your narrative to those numbers. And then give them slow, small, bite-sized goals to go after on a broader scale, which is slow. I'm gonna tell you patience. that's the other thing for me, and I'm very impatient. So, but it's been pretty slow. Is the other thing I'll say. It takes a lot of time to kind of get people moving sometimes.
Thanks so much for sharing, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. That's good points. I really appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense to me. So thank you for that.
Amazing. Anybody else want to raise a question, answer Andrew's question, whatever? Can also be a space to talk about the book. So if there are any certain chapters that we kind of blaze through, I can offer more questions, but definitely don't want to take up the airtime if there's folks that can get value from other folks.
Well, since I was going to ask a question, I'm going to ask another question because everybody's so quiet because I can't shut up. So how do you guys like promoted Record Candor in your organization? Like, for example, I used to work at Booz Allen and that was their thing, right? We had a whole workshop like on orientation. They'd be like, we do Record Candor. You know, this is what we do. Here's Kiptop's book. You can get it for free on X, Y, and Z. And then fast forward to 4 months later, I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? Like they don't do that. So again, being that I work for a company, like, I'm trying to promote this, right? My reports talk to me. I actually buy them the book out of my own pocket. And I say, you can read it if you want to. It's your call. This is how I give you feedback. This is how I roll. Some of my people are like, oh, you know what? I'm actually rooted empathy, which is funny. I love them that they use that term. It makes me happy that they do it. And then I'm hoping to get others to be on board. Kind of what Laura said about like kind of spearhead, like, hey, look, these are my people. This is working for them. You guys do it too. So we'll know how some of you guys here have like promoted it, talked about it, get people on board like that. That's maybe outside your company like own initiative.
I can take a stab first and then would love to have other folks like hop in. I think what you point out is a really key part of radical candor. It's something that everybody needs to be bought into, and having the shared language helps a ton, because when one side is bought into feedback and this particular language around feedback, and the other side is completely like oblivious, it's really difficult to kind of paint that feedback is kind, clear feedback is kind, like really painting these shared kind of beliefs. And so I'm sorry that you have to even ask this question, because it sounds a little bit like an uphill battle to kind of convince folks to really believe in this stuff. So I think really kind of echoing what Laura was just sharing, what do your leaders care about? What are some key cultural stakeholders in your business and org? Are there certain folks that really like fly the banner for this that you can kind of rally in? I'm sure the HR team, I know the company's probably small, but if there's somebody in that function that can really own this as part of kind of the L&D up-leveling manager strategy too. You're a manager, and I'm guessing your second job is trying to be the cultural rallier for all these different processes and stuff, but it's not your primary role too. So I'm sure it's putting a lot of pressure on like all the things that you have to do in order to push this in your organization. So delegating that work, having other folks be champions alongside you, I think it only makes your case stronger, hopefully. Paloma, yes.
Yeah, another thing I was looking online as well had to do with like radical candor criticism. I know that there's a bunch of people that push back on radical candor, want to call it something else. And I think it's because, from what I understand, and maybe others can, if they know more, from what I understand, you first have to have trust and in the team, which takes time to build. Sometimes you think you have trust, but maybe it's not there. So there's ways for us to kind of check on those things, build over time with those things, and that's when you can actually apply radical candor, be direct about what you want to change. So I think that's kind of the pushback when Andrew was asking about like promoting this. is like a good caveat to mention. So just wanted to share.
Lovely point. Thank you so much. Laura, please.
I'll add to that too. I think the problem I have less, it's not really necessarily finding people to try and glom onto it. It's more people who've misinterpreted the book and weaponized their use of radical candor as an excuse to treat people poorly. Like, I have seen that happen so frequently. And they don't take, and that's, Palone, to your point, they don't take the time to meet people. They don't take time to build that trust. They come in and they're just like, I'm going to tell you this, and it's radical candor, and you're left going like, I don't feel like you cared about me personally at all. Like, you don't know me, you don't know how to talk to me. Why are you talking to me this way? Like, it is, and it is, honestly, it is violent. Like, it's my best way to describe it. Like, it feels very violent, and I see people, it starts to alienate people from an inclusion standpoint. It's awful. And so a lot of times I actually I don't talk about practicing radical candor as radical candor, because these people crop up out of the woodwork and they're like, oh, you want to practice radical candor? And and then they're just, it's just like firing on all cylinders. So I don't know. It's I don't have a solution for that one. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing that's happened with the book. Probably unfortunate too, but yeah.
Yeah, I think actually Kim addresses this in one of the kind of new editions. For the second edition, she talks about how folks completely misunderstand, and something about the phrasing maybe of radical candor. All these folks ironically are slotting into obnoxious aggression, which is really hilarious in my view. Like, that's, you're actually still following the book even though you didn't read it and stuff. So keeping that in mind, asking these questions, Andrew, you're already right on the path, and there are a lot of leaders that share your sentiment and are here to help. So please send a LinkedIn connection request, meet up outside of this group, and start. These conversations are really important. They're going to lead to more happier, healthier, sustainable companies overall. So really great stuff. Before I leave you all, I definitely want to just show the kind of resources that we provide by you being in this book club. If I didn't mention it earlier, we had over 200 applicants and over 100 of you actually made it into the book club. So it is a little exclusive, which is lovely. And we also have a few resources for you. So let me just expand this and share. That book club hub, there have been a few links, but in case you missed it, Monica can also send the link into the chat right now. This is our little custom hub that we made to kind of provide some resources for you. And this is inaccurate, but anyway, so you can go through a bunch of different sections here. The kind of live session details are all provided here. They're also in all the Google Calendar invites. The club member directory is your spot to kind of who was that person's name again, or where did they work, or how do I find their LinkedIn? It's all included right here for you to navigate through. So please use that resource. We also have some few like member discounts for you as well. So earlier today, I believe Kyle, you mentioned how clutch it was to have the video book. Be Kyle, be smart, watch this whole thing in 25 minutes. We have a free video book for you from Kim Scott's team, which is fantastic. So if you haven't already, get that. Share your account with other folks. Please don't share the code with your entire team because we have a limited supply of these codes, unfortunately, but that would be fantastic. We can also give you 15% off of Kona, which is really exciting. We're a manager support platform that really prioritizes manager well-being and employee well-being. So watch that if you're interested. And in addition, if you want to be somebody who can raise your hand and unmute and actually talk to Kim Scott during our next session, please, please, please submit a Kim Scott question here. You'll be able to submit it. If you're selected, you will be the person that gets to actually talk to her, and then you'll probably be able to add her on LinkedIn and become besties. So that is available to you. Just know that you have to go through this little process here so we don't have like a million hand raises when Kim comes into the room. And in addition, all event recordings will be available here after significant editing. All the one-on-ones, none of that is included. So that is all safe, and only you know what happened in those breakout rooms. But yeah, all the event recordings are available there. And yeah, this has been Manager Book Club Session 1. I know it's a smaller group, but thank you so much for participating and offering so much compassion. We'll see you at the next event, fingers crossed. Thank you for coming. So, yay.
Bye.
Thank you.